I've just asked one person from each group to very briefly tell us about the idea they put up, not to read the flip chart because we can do that, but simply to give us just a key point. So this one, who was involved in this one here? Regulatory authorities. Okay, would you like to just, as I said, 1-2 minutes max, give us some of the key points?
So basically, we examined a case study.
Can we have shush, please?
Ben. I can't see Ben. Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. I feel safer now having the expert around. We spoke about the case of stem cells, and we kind of learned quite a bit. And what we think the challenge is getting the balance right for all stakeholders involved. And hence this statement of regulatory authorities need to design a fit-for-purpose regulatory framework which takes into account their public duty and the accountability, but does not stifle innovation or unduly hold up clinical trials. And the clinical trials obviously refer to the stem cell example or case study that we tried to analyze, and we arrived. And basically we picked up the fourth challenge from what Eve put down, and we applied it in the stem cell industry, and then again came up with a challenge.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, this next one, what is innovation? Who was that?
That was us. Actually, the question we were answering was what kind of variation would facilitate innovation? I don't think this is working. And the question is, we thought, well, what is innovation? A little bit, and we kind of asked, whether that was bound up in ethical values. But pretty quickly, we went on to the answer that it was to do with the improvement of human health. And then we asked the question, well, why wouldn't we adopt the China model, which essentially is completely unfettered, voluntary or otherwise experimentation on human beings with embryonic stem cells. And we concluded that that had some merits, of course, but that it had some potentially large downsides, which were to do with the consequences of people exploiting the system and harm that could occur to others. So that was our sort of next port of call, which was to do with the level of that regulation. So we thought there needed to be some regulation to do with harm that could be caused to the parties, otherwise that wouldn't work. We then looked at the infrastructure that was necessary to encourage this, facilitate this innovation, and we thought that technical standards should be agreeable globally and information systems to support those available globally, so that as research was conducted, that information could be disseminated. We then looked at the question of taking it to market, and this is obviously where I got excited, of course, because it involved money. And the conclusion we drew was it was very important that that part of it was distinguished from the innovatory side in conducting the original research, but it was given due weight. And that, we felt, was the point at which things like patents really came into their own, when you were taking a product to market and people would make money, and then they would see a return on their investment, and that would encourage them to do more. So we ended up on I haven't got it there, but this is the kind of picture which I'll just draw for you conceptually. We had the research over here, where that needed to be considered with some sort of ethical regulatory framework. We had the taking to market, where that would involve the capitalism and the return on investment. That would require that type of regulatory framework, may include patents, of course. But underpinning it, there would be an information and set of technical standards that would make it work. That was our conclusion.
Great, thank you very much. So it's this one, the green on innovation. Thank you. Okay. Mission statement for regulators, diagnosis of problem.
Okay, we were looking at the fourth challenge, the mission statement for regulators. I think we wanted to really ask the question, is there a problem, first of all? We wanted to spend a bit more time diagnosing the problem, and indeed whose problem it actually is, because it could be that the regulatory system is obviously working for some actors better than it's working for others. And we're interested in really sort of whose say is being listened to and is helping to shape the regulatory system, and whether that might need to change. We also are concerned about the boundaries of the regulator's responsibilities. So they are only one actor in the system, and indeed there might be different regulatory bodies engaging in regulating different parts of the system. So the question there is, what is their responsibility, and where are the limits to that? And one of the examples, illustrations of this is, for example, that the regulatory system in pharmaceutical innovation has these very clear milestones, effectively, which act as triggers for investment. So we thought that clearly that the regulatory system does send signals, regulators send signals to industry about which technologies can be invested in, and when projects should be allowed to continue or not. So clearly that there are these wider roles that the regulatory agency plays, but also there is a limit. I mean, perhaps it is there after all just to send signals, and then other parts of the system need to change rather than the regulatory system. For example, in better characterising patient populations before you put drugs into trials, for example.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. Then we have green one here, drivers for consumer genomics.
Hi. Right, well, Audrey and I have an interest in food, nutrition and genomics. So we came at this from the drivers for what the consumers would want from genomics, to see where you could get your variety in the pharmaceutical and other industries. And so the things we identified is that from the consumer's point of view, prevention is going to be huge as well, potentially, not just disease management. So you're looking at the whole wellness disease spectrum and how that's defined. So you're regulation and validation of biomarkers might come to the fore, which we haven't discussed, and how you actually classify disease and dysfunction when you've got the biobanks are up and running, and we can actually classify disease much better and much earlier. Is it going to be at the transcription level or where? But to put all that into, as we were sort of brainstorming this, at some point you're going to need to deliver that. So health professionals need to be educated to think in terms of wellness, not just disease. You've got the whole pharma-nutra interface, potentially ethnopharmacology. There is some evidence already, I think, in terms of African Americans and warfarin. There's some ethnopharmacology. I'm not really sure of that, but I've seen something about ethnopharmacology. So when you're talking about the development of the Chinese and Indian markets, is it for their own populations? Will that transfer to multi-populations? Cosmetic, of course, and all this will come into product claims, how you regulate the claims. And when you're looking at the regulation, it should be risk-based, flexible to respond to new circumstances, and perhaps tiered to weight of evidence when you're talking about informing consumers of preventive medicines, pharma foods. Is it convincing evidence? Is it possible, probable? Can you have grades of evidence where the consumers can make informed choices? And potentially, is this an expansion of the over-the-counter prescription? How you all put it into a framework to deliver? But there's plenty of, particularly the cosmetic. There are other avenues in terms of variety and drivers simply in classic disease management.
Great, thank you very much. For mission statement.
I hate the fact that this is not my topic, the one that I proposed. But in the process, I found it very interesting. So we started in our group thinking a little bit controversially. Clearly, regulating bodies are not functioning as they should. So I think that the idea is that we cannot solve problems of the present and the future in the way by thinking in the same way as when we created them. So we thought that we should change it a little bit. The role currently is controlling, and under the pretense or the good intention of protecting public's interest and well-being. And we say that what we have seen today is that regulatory bodies usually stifle innovation. So instead of making innovation, control the primary purpose of regulatory bodies, we thought that we should make innovation the primary role of regulatory bodies. So, in other words, mission of a regulatory body was to facilitate, encourage innovation, while at the same time making sure that the public interests are protected. So, protection of public interest without over-stabilizing. Let's see. Smart regulation was a term that was mentioned today. And what we would really be interested in is, all right, if we think about regulation, how can we make it smart, really? Is it just risk aversion that needs to be a little bit more flexible, or should we go further? And we had a very, very good discussion with lots of ideas, brainstorming. We could continue for about half an hour on that. But what came up was that, basically the role of a regulatory body could be the one that encourages innovation, protects the public, but at the same time what we said in the end was that a regulatory body oops. It doesn't like what I say, going away. A regulatory body acts as a filter for the evil of the bad pharmaceutical companies or any other companies, energy companies, in order to protect the public. But what we have also is that the public sometimes reacts in a way that is not appropriate for what the businesses, the companies are doing. So we see a strong reaction in the United States about stem cells from people that are uninformed, but as was very well put, make more noise than anyone else. So why can't the regulatory body as well act as a filter for the evil that comes from the public towards the industry, and in that way inform and make more noise about what is good about all the innovation that is coming up, and actually make so much more noise than the people that are shouting right now. So that's it. Sorry, I talked a lot.
And I think we've got only one more. This one. Who would like to?
Thank you. Right, well, this is, as you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 proposals all in one. And it's comes. What we discussed was, in a sense, trying to understand the purpose of the regulator, so getting down more into how regulation comes into being and what are the processes that underlie it and make it happen. And in particular, I think this was a discussion that we had, which I think is an interesting point. It's about the fact that the regulation that falls on an industry, so to speak, depends on whether it's seen as being an old function by new means or whether it's a new function. And I think that IT and bicycles and things like that were new. And so if you'd have, I don't know if you've ever seen these books on design where all the 100 million types of bicycle were invented, initially, and then the system weeded out the ones that worked, and that sort of thing. And so with IT, this is a new industry. I mean, they didn't know what to do with it, really, and it grew whilst they were working out what to do with it. So that the trouble with biotech has been that it comes along and they say, look, I've got this fantastic new knowledge and technology, and it's a cure for arthritis. And they said, oh, that's a medicine. Oh, we know about medicine. Bang, you've got the whole lot of regulation now falls upon you from the old sector, so to speak. So what's very important is how this classification process, of the kind of function, so that we were saying, like with the knowledge, the bio knowledge or genetic knowledge, which is very important and interesting and something new too, but it's busy pedaling backwards, trying to carefully say, no, this is not a medicine. This is not medicine. No, this is something else, because that way they can escape and allow a more creative sort of development process to come to maturity at the right time, not at the beginning. So that was kind of a lot of the discussion we had. So we're really interested in understanding and with a view to designing a new process for setting regulation. Obviously, regulation is about modifying, let's say, pure market behaviour, as we heard about the wickedness of it, and but maintaining innovation. And also, of course, protecting consumers. So, I mean, this is the kind of overall thing. But it's this issue of, at the wrong stage, if you like, bringing a whole set of pre-organised regulations that were suitable, perhaps, or had developed for the pharmaceutical industry, got whacked on biotech, and that has the effect that we've heard about.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Right, now, what you need to do is to choose one of those. You don't need to stay in the group you already were in. In fact, I would encourage you to join a different group. So can you come up and just put your initial or your name, Christian name, on one of the flip charts? And then when everybody's done it, they can take a flip chart and go off and discuss it in greater depth. Now, what we need you to do when you go off with your flip chart, at the end of my presentation, there is a big slide. You need this because this guides you as to what you need to do. You need to choose a leader who is prepared to take the idea forward. We need one person who can have a sufficient passion and energy to take the thing forward. It takes an awful lot of effort to put a project together and to liaise with Brian and myself. And just a few questions that you need to discuss. For example, which disciplines would you like to involve? There is not going to be all the people that you need for a project within this group. Who else would you like to invite? If you have time, just give a little thought to where would you find the funding. You may not have time today, and next steps. So when you come back, I think you'll have half an hour. So if you come back at 1:45, and again, the leader from each group simply tell us the outline of the project. Who else would you like to involve, and what are your next steps? And that will be the first step, really, the seed of any potential project. And those of you who do not wish to be involved, you do not have to. I'm not. It's entirely your choice. Okay. So, but I would like to invite you to choose a topic and go and discuss it further.